Hi, I'm Tony Sage. I'm a dev and this is Sage Dev. I am starting a new project today. I've done a couple other things that haven't been recorded, but I figured this was worth the effort. We're going to start working on my new portfolio project. I have a number of things that I'm ready to link to this, and I worked back and forth with Claude, or with Gemini, pardon me, to come up with a concept that I like. I have this design in mind. It's going to be pretty lightweight, mostly going to be front-end JavaScript. We're going to add some bells and whistles. I want it to have parallax. I want it to scroll for me on breakpoints, and I'm going to embed all of my different portfolio work projects in here. I like the way that it layers some code in the background. I like the way that it looks very technical, and it's leveraging my Sage Dev logo. I came back and forth with them, coming up with a concept, and I added a prompt. I want to create an execution plan for Claude. So this is the execution plan. I've dropped that in a very loose format. Claude doesn't need it to be that neat and tidy, along with my designs. And I'm going to use an agentic development process for this. So I built my own agentic system. It's not going to be public yet. Maybe once I get it out of beta, we can make that public. But right now I have the orchestrator, which is going to be probably Opus, I believe. And then we have a front-end designer. Then there is a front-end developer, back-end developer, and these can work in parallel, right? And they can each, I've limited it to 2 sub-agents per agent so that we're not blowing through all of our tokens in one go. I also have it so that they're running on Sonnet. So it's going to be a little bit slower, but because of the structure of how we've built it, there's a lot of lanes that are set specifically to one role, and they will back and forth communicate and get that done. So front end, back end dev, a QA tester. We're going to work on making this fully automated testing. So we have scripts built for that, and then one for architecture documentation. And once they all go through, it goes back to the designer for final verification that it meets with the design, and then comes back to me. And if there's any point that it has a hiccup or it has a question or anything like that, it should come back to me for the final say. I'm the product owner in this instance. So I set up that, I set it into a plugin. With Claude, we can set plugins in repos, and then those plugins can be brought in to the system. Let me just switch to the new repo. So yeah, and you can see this is what I'm starting with. I don't have anything more complicated than this. So there's going to be a lot of stop and starts in this video because it's going to take time to process. I'm probably going to burn through some tokens. Right now I'm at 8%. We'll see where we end up. This agentic development, I've been playing around with it a little bit. I have some other sites that I recently built that I leveraged it. It's good for complexity and automatic testing and letting things fix themselves. There's less involvement, but it is much slower and more process oriented because the goal is to build something that can build itself, right? That's the whole concept. So let's just start. Before I do anything, I always want to plan. I have a plan to build my new portfolio. I want to build it using the Agentic system that I have using the feature call. The art related to it is already in the repo. there's 2 design images and my logo. I also have a rough storyboard document that I'd like to leverage to try to build this in a way that we can be proud of it. If any of that seems out of place or needs clarification, please let me know. Let's work through this thing. Agentic, I don't know. And I'm going to add that slash. So if you look, I have my repo is called Agentic Dev. And if I do feature, then it kicks off all of these agents. But we're going to let it help me walk through it first. Then maybe we can clean up and clarify some things before it reaches out to these agents. So we're going to pause real quick and see what it comes back with. So you can see here, it's automatically running some background shells to get through all of this. It's looking at the repo, what's currently out. It's looking at the pipeline setup that we have, and it's going to list all the different things related to, and this should be working for my Sage Dev repo. So there's really nothing there for it to find. But with the plan, even though I'm using this agentic development, we can refine some things before it ever passes it off. And since Opus is going to be my orchestrator, anytime that one of the other things has an ask, before it comes to me, it'll go to Opus and see if it's in our initial plan doc. So the idea is with this plan, this pre-plan phase 0, it can actually solve some of those problems and make it even more automated compared to me just saying, hey, build me a thing that looks like this. Okay, so here's our first planning. I could do React, JS, or Vue. We'll do React. Fits the repeating project cards and parallax, best tooling ecosystem for GSAP, which is something that was in our planning notes. So let's do that. How should we scope this through featured? Phase 1, 2, 3. So phase 1 would be foundation and horizontal scroll. Phase 2 would be transition and deep project showcase. And phase 3 would be parallax depth, micro interactions, and polish. Each gets its own UX, dev, QA, design, verify, pass. Phased is great. Can we confirm we are leveraging plugin 0.1.2? That's my most recent version. Placeholders now, real later. So I built this Agentic Dev to have some pretty strict guardrails around what is allowed to install with NPM and with any kind of package manager. To override that, I'm having the orchestrator create a lanes.json file where we say, okay, you can't use anything unless it's in this lane. So by asking it to do this pre-planning and set this up, it's going to create a Claude lanes.json with the dependency allow list, allowing me to use those NPM packages. It's going to use React, Vite, Tailwind, and the GSAP scroll trigger, and Linus, which I am not. Matching your logo's charcoal, coral, cyan aesthetic. I'm not sure what Linus is, but I'm sure it's great. We'll see how it works. A product owner setup pass, init Claude, and carefully tuned lanes JSON with dependency allow list. So here's my plan. Greenfield, not a repo, no code, no nothing. So it has my storyboard and my images, React and Vite. That's fine. Pipeline reads claude.md and enforce lanes.js gates. Phase A, product owner setup must land before any feature run. Okay, So because of those lanes, it's going to first do this once. It's going to do a git init to set this into git, which is fine. It's going to build my assets into a proper directory reference instead of the root, author a Claude MD to set those lanes. So it's going to say it's Vite, React, Tailwind with Sass, GSAP, and scroll trigger. And it's going to set some basics here. And then it's going to have a Claude lanes.json allow list. It's going to author this from the template, and then it's going to run. And once it runs, it's going to provide it a prompt with scaffolding and walk through all of those 3 features. And then we have an npm run dev that we will execute to check. Horizontal scroll GSAP sites are fiddly, which is why we're phasing it in. Okay, so when we implement these things, we're talking agentic, right? We want it to be hands-off. We want it to collaborate. We don't want to have to interact over much. So while I don't usually set this into bypass mode, because this is all local, and because I don't want to have to interrupt it mid-process over and over again unless the ask is relevant, I want it to keep working, I will change this to bypass permissions. So just keep that in mind. When you're working on something that's ever in production, you should never allow this. But because we want all of the agents to play nice together, and we don't want to have to give it permission every time it wants to create a file and every time that it wants to do anything, we're going to go ahead and implement that. So it's going to work through the plan. I'll come back when it has set up those lanes.json file. We'll take a look at that and how it runs through the agent process. So let me show you some of these tools that we're using. So one of the things we're doing in Claude, we have this lanes.json. In this, we are structuring it so that each of our different agents has a separate, limited subsets of things they're able to do. So if we want our front end is going to be doing a line share of the work, and if we want it to be able to affect the Vite, Tailwind, Post CSS, and all the other scripts there, they need to be added into this lanes.json. This is so that we are extra strict and don't allow extra things to happen in the future that we're not intending. We want this to keep the lanes very, very tight. We're also saying specifically what our dependencies are. We don't want them to add anything additional. Even if somehow they get through this allow and this strict framework, we're saying these are what we're going to actually let occur, which is why we need to do that planning step in the front. This is all set up by the orchestrator by Opus. It's also moved around some of my things. I created a Claude.md with some basics over what it thinks that everyone can use. And because of how strict it is, some of these things like the package.json need to be established ahead of the agent. And it's finalizing that framework before it hands it off. So it's just checking to see that it actually rendered in local and that things are starting to look okay. And then it's going to hand it to the designer to really fine-tune the requirements and set up a style guide and things like that. So it looks like it boots, React renders, Tailwind compiles, no console errors, and it's getting through the rest of that pre-work, and we'll come back when it starts delegating. Okay, looks like it's done. All it really did for me is set up the very bare minimum. So it created my shell, it created my main React DOM, it set a couple styles. I didn't have to do that. This is going to be readdressed, but this is just allowing all the Tailwind bits to come together, and that's it. It did set a package JSON based on those dependencies we provided. If we need more, we'll need to adjust those. But that's all it did. If we went to look at it right now, all it's going to have is all it would have is a charcoal black background with some text on it. So I think that we're good. We've already given it a cursory review. Let's start. It's just good video. Here we go. So it is starting its run. So phase 0 is creating the pipeline state file and running the lane pre-flight probe. You can see there's a doc spec. So what it's doing is saying, okay, what's our current state? We don't want it to assume that everything's already been established. We want it to find what's already been established and extend off of that. So when we're doing this dev in the future, unless there's something that's outside of the scope, like if I'm doing Terraform, that'll probably be outside of the scope of our agentic development because of the strict guardrails. Other than that, everything that we do through this process should probably go through this agentic flow, especially so that we can get our QA pre-built. Okay, so it's running its first agent. All of this is going to run in the background. So you can see this is what it's already done, but this is the actual agent. So you are a designer. This is a complex feature. We set it to tier. So the higher tier, the more scrutiny that the agent's going to take. So because this is brand new and complex, we want to give it the highest level of scrutiny possible. If it's something very straightforward, like we're going to add a footer, it probably wouldn't warrant the same level of testing and documentation as it would for a more complex feature. So it correctly said this is complex. It's getting all the context that we've pre-established, and this is all passed to it from the orchestrator, which is Opus. This is the stack do not propose anything else, please and thank you. And it's broken all of our pieces, including what is not in our spec. So this is happening in the background, right? If I wanted to see the output, this is actually contained in code. So you can see my pipeline will give basically the same context as what's in there. So we'll come back. It did a commit for me when it got through phase A, which I guess is the pre-phase 0. When it did that, it created some of the framework and the direction that it's going to take. Let's let it spin a little while. Okay, so it looks like that has completed. So it ran through, and we can look at what it's done, or we can look here. It built out a design system. So we can see what colors are here with tints and shades, wireframes, gradients, typography. It really did a deep dive. If you actually look at the amount of diving that it's done and the amount of time that it took, this probably took 5 minutes or more just for it to get into each and every file, deep digging into the images, typography, the storyboard, and analyze all of them. And then it created out of these some markdown files. So the designer doesn't actually develop anything. It's just adding to the scope of work. So if you look here, Currently it's in progress in the design step, and it says, okay, based on the ask, this is the ask that was given by the agent, by the orchestrator. There's going to be specs that are set by the designer. The designer sets all of these. It even comes out with some layouts that it can pass on to the front-end dev, along with setting our plan for things like classes, using BEM again, how it would set up the hooks and the boundaries, the scrolls. So it's pretty deep, which is why it takes so long to run. But it did give me 2 questions. So here are the questions. Mockup's headline uses a geometric architecture sans, but no web font on the dependency allow list. How should the headline be handled? Self-hosted font file needs no dependency, so we can host our own space grotesque. So we will do that. PNG has a light background and dark purple gray watermark. Leave off the white text. That is fine. So it's taking those answers and it's updating its design doc. And then when that's done, it's going to drop it into the front end and back end dev lane. And from there, they're going to work in tandem. Now it's going to go capture those dependencies. Okay, we'll let it pause again. Here, we're looking at the front end is working. So we have the design system that was implemented and the changes it asked about, like the fonts and things, were handled. It also set my logo, you can see here, to a PNG that is transparent, so I can set it. It downloaded the fonts, and we're moving on from the specs. So if we look at the pipeline state, this is in case for some reason we get interrupted or I go to bed and wake up, because that's what's going to happen. It'll see where we're currently at and where the logic had dropped so that we can continue. There's actually I'm not going to actually execute it, but there's a feature resume, so that if I get to a state where this dropped, say I went to go get a coffee and I came back and it had dropped or somehow lost context, I could go to feature resume and it would pick up right where it left off. So even though this is a slow process, as you could see, it's very thorough. So it is modifying, this is my phase change, and then it's going to look at what was set in the specs by the designer and start implementing those. And that's when we start getting interesting. Usually you would have the front and the back end work in tandem, but because this is no back end content, it's just going to the front end dev. And the front end dev will actually spin, like you can see, it's running multiple commands at once. And it'll execute those. There's a limit to how many it can run. But with all of that context, it should make it much quicker for it to develop. If you look at my usage, because I'm going to take a break here in a bit. I don't know how much longer I'm going to stay on tonight, but I'm already at 66% used. This is a very token heavy process, but the end results will hopefully be worth the effort. So there's a lot of good things about using this process, and there's a lot of things that take a lot of time. If you really want to leverage a tool like this, you can see it is going through every single piece, every doc, all the context before it starts doing anything. At this point, we haven't even really started the development. All the commands so far are just checking what's already in place, which is nothing. It's been running this for about 18 minutes. So I wouldn't use this for speed when we're looking at implementing in the future. This won't take so long because it will already have that context in memory. But right now, with it being so new and a brand new plan, it's going to take its time and it's going to do its due diligence. If we look at how this works, eventually outside of the actual pipeline, it'll have its own folder just with what it's implemented, which acts as a lasting memory. It'll also come up with its own plan for execution based on the spec. So yeah, it's going to take a while. It's doing all of the development. There's no back end, and it's limited in the number of agents it can run. And if you look at my usage, I'm already at 74%. So we're going to let this spin a little bit longer. Maybe I'll give it another 15 minutes. Oh, looks like it's started implementing. And in standard fashion, it's a huge amount of docs for a little bit of code. So this is setting my easing in and out, my scroll trigger. It's setting my motion tokens to say how far and how long it will move. But because it did all that pre-planning, it should write these much quicker. So we'll let it keep going and we'll see what else it comes up with. So it's still in progress, but it's been doing a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. After that initial planning phase, it has built out all of my styles. So if you look at my index, it's basically rewritten all of it from that initial, including positioning and stations. It's set the Q fade, motion, horizontal, hero, GSAP, and built us some components. It's even setting these components in our actual colors and setting them into, like this one's a linear gradient, this one is my logo, it's setting the motion capture, and then it's setting an actual SVG image. So it's still developing, it's not done yet. This is kind of the first real visible piece that it's come up with. It's going to continue to process. I am going to go to bed and we'll see where it ends up. All right, it's the next morning, so we want to let it keep doing its thing. To do that, we would just do a feature resume, or I could do a continue, which is probably better for the orchestrator if I keep working it this way. If I wanted to start it in a new session, you could just do feature resume. So things that'll get done next, it's going to continue to iterate. When it feels like it's in a good spot, looks like it's still set for implementation. The specs haven't changed much. Let's see. No, I'm not seeing any change there. So what's going to happen when it gets done, it's going to check against itself, and then it's going to pass this to QA, and QA is going to do a bunch of screenshots. QA is going to set its own testing guidelines, and from those testing guidelines, whenever it makes, it'll open it in browser. So Claude now has an in-browser tool, and it leverages it. Part of the automated tests outside of just the HTML tests and things that are in scope is also going to be taking screen grabs and verifying that things have changed according to design and not just because. When it's all done, it'll go through QA, and then our technical documenter will update and create a README and some docs for the final technical architecture conversation. So we've been spinning, it passed it through to QA, and it's setting up our requirements to run our automated testing scripts, including an engine. So if we look at that, so it looks like it's adding to my private local, and it's continuing to run. We'll come back. So it's been spinning a little bit, and you can see it's come up with, in its QA, it takes screenshots. I'm not really satisfied with the look and feel of some of these components. We'll see what the front-end designer has to say. Mobile looks pretty good. We'll need to evaluate. But that being said, this is what it uses for testing later. There's only so much that AI can do for us. It's looking not as good as I'd hoped, but about in alignment with what I've been expecting. We'll need to see what it comes back with. I'd love for the front end to say, hey, this doesn't match our spec, our design, but we'll see. I'm going to let this continue to run. This morning, already at 22% used for my 4-hour window. 4.5-hour window, I can't remember. I am going to go and leave this continue spinning, and we'll see where it is when we get back. Okay, we're back. It looks like QA walked through all of its thing. It came back with a failure. It said that it failed 30 out of 35 criteria, pass 5 fails, 2 defects, and outlined why. It said that part of the reason it failed was because they required an NPM package to run it, and that NPM package was not in our lanes. So it asked what I wanted to do there. I let it use bash. Easy enough. The other thing that it did was it said in the initial planning from the design that they wanted the logo to fade in. I don't care if it fades in, and honestly, it's a little bit of a jump that could affect our accessibility scores. So instead, we're going to keep it visible. It's going to go through those and create enforce lanes. So if we look at QA, it should outline exactly what it found. It has critical, and then it has additional backlog. Looks like it hasn't finished that out yet. But for the critical, it says the CTA on the page is unusable, undiscoverable, so it's passing that back. The other that it found was a visual layer defect on desktop motion enabled load, and it's setting that back as well. So it might still be finishing up, but when it has finished up, it's going to pass this back to the front-end developer and say, hey, what do we do here? There's also some, on the open questions, it passed to the orchestrator so that Claude can make some decisions, or Opus can make some decisions. It told me to follow the dashboard template defect.md. Neither existed, it created them. The test location doesn't match its actual location. When it tried to stand it up, it didn't work. That's why it added the npm to the bash to the lanes.json. CLI is blocked for pre-tool use bash, so it's going to unlock that. Logo fades, and we made a judgment call on that. So it's updating. This is the orchestrator, is updating the lanes.json to include bash. So in there, it's saying for the front end and QA engineer, it's going to allow them to use npm, and it's going to limit the scope of npm to bash. So that's still running. I did take a little while step away from this. So it's a big ask to just go, yeah, we're going to sit and stare at this for extended period of time. When we're done with this first phase, so if you remember from our initial conversation way back, it broke it up in the plan. So it's going to do 3 different phases. The first phase is setting it up. So it's executing phase A, and then it's going to break the other parts, including the parallax setup and the other things, into separate steps. That way you can iterate. I'm trying to find where that was. There's the first feature pipeline is here, but it's going to run more than one. So you can find all of that outside of asking it. You can find the decisions that it's made in your history. So I can go to the plan. Phase A is before we do the actual implementation. Phase B is a phased feature pipeline. So the first one is foundation and horizontal scroll. That's why the art on here is not exactly what we're expecting, because it hasn't set up those other 2 pieces. The next one is going to be the actual transition, where it has the projects listed, and then the third one's going to be parallax depth. So it won't be fully complete until all 3 of those things have done their work. So it's not really fair for me to judge based on the current design, but it's going to judge itself. So it looks like it passed that AQ with the outstanding bugs back to the front-end dev, outlined what those bugs were, set some constraints, and then now it can use an npm run build, which is what we want. Start the server at npm run dev with the port. So if I wanted to npm run build and then npm run dev with the port, I could open it up. And ultimately, the agent that's in charge of documenting this is going to stand it up and give us a README and give us some real docs. I'm hoping that it also stands up some sequence diagrams and other things that make things easier to visually sell to a client. So we will let it spin a little bit more as it works through this initial phase, and then we will come back. So we are back. The agent did complete its QA analysis, and those fixes were reapplied. If we go to the defects that it found and look at the top, it says it's a verified fix. And it says what the test plan is that's outlined there. So in the test plans, moving forward, there's a QA test plan. It gives specifics on what was introduced and how it was fixed. In this one, we're talking about npm run dev, npm run build. And once that was changed, then we have the CSS button pending was moved, the opacity was changed per the answer that we provided. So this is good. It's moving forward. Since then, it is passed it on to the designer to do a final look over. You can see it updated it to design verification. It's going to make sure that what the front end and AQ tested and verified actually match their intended design. And if you look at this, it says design verification, QA is passed. Feature 1, please audit the implemented hero against your spec. If it sees that there's some difference, then it'll take it back into dev again. I highly doubt it will find anything, but it's processing that now. So we'll follow up when that is completed. So theoretically, when it gets to this state, it should already have looped through the QA fix, and then it's going through to design. It is going to go through the design review versus the initial design and verify that it actually worked the way they wanted it to. Okay, we'll let it spin. So it looks like the front end, the designer called out that we had a weird diamond thing here instead of an arrow. I don't know that I love the shimmer here. I might have it remove that, but this looks much more in alignment with our expectations, which is good. I will potentially replace this with an image, or at the very least give it some further direction and how we're going to clean that up later, but I think that's closer to the initial design. So it's going through a final QA. When it does those additional asks, they should be a much leaner run because the severity of that extra ask is not a tier 3. But either way, we're going to let it run and see what it comes back with. Okay, so it looks like everything got hashed out. Docs project overview is the official docs, and this should be updated with every feature. So that's where we have this foundation hero. Every time that it adds a new feature, it should extend this. It also added a README, so it gives me the stack. It gives me what do I need to run to view it. Looks like it gives me a basic layout, and then tells me where the rest of my documentation is. So that's all well and good. Claude should be updated too, and I think that's fine. With all of that, it gives me the chance to finally accept or tweak it. I'm going to accept it and remove those duplicates that I initially had. So it's going to do that. When that's done, we should be getting into parallax. So let me just run this. I don't think I need to install anything, but let me do that. npm install, npm run dev, start the server. I don't need a production build right now, and it should be on localhost. So let me actually open that in a whole new window so we get the entire experience. So let's open that. All right, so you can see this initial piece was just standing this up, making it so it moves. I don't love this, if I'm being honest. I like how it writes itself, which is cool, but I don't love how that SVG outline is set. But you can see all the polygons and things that's built in here, so it's trying its best to do something neat. I think this arrow glow I will need to tweak. So let's just pretend that doesn't exist. Okay, but that's our first step. We have a little bit of extra glow here. I mean, this is in alignment with what I was expecting. This is just the first step. So from here, we're going to let it run through. It's already accepted that feature 1, which is the base, and then setting up the hero is done. And then it's going to move into the next. Let me go ahead and commit and push this out. And we'll come back. I don't think you need to be in every single step of this, honestly. It's going to be pretty repetitive. We're going to come back after everything's completed and review the end state. Hey, we're back again. It's the final reveal. So we went through our entire pre-plan. That's the storyboard, including the tech stack, section by section flow, parallax, and little flashy details, including border tracing and all of that. So now This is what AI came up with. I wouldn't say it's an exact match for our design, but it's pretty close. And I don't hate the way that it looks. It's also applied using this agentic flow. It's applied a lot of good ADA compliance. It's rendered it well, so it had a pretty good load speed test. A lot of the parallax things are going on here that I might tweak. I like this motion, but I don't like that hollow. I don't love the way that this pointed SVG rendered. I'm not sure. I'm kind of torn. You can see it draws it on render, which is very nice. I like the parallax motion, and my featured content all has a interesting hover focus state with that overflow and my code in the background, which is cool. This is just from the prompts. I haven't done anything custom. If we look at the docs on here, we've got the foundation hero, gives me layout, talks about the states that are set and the styling, semantic landmarks, ARIA requirements, focus states. All this is set by our initial front end schema, the specs. So there's the spec, which is outlining the requirements. And this is what is passed. I showed this once. This is what's passed to the development agents, right? This is a nice auto doc. So it does it in progress. So if at some point I go, why does this look like that? I can find it in the specs. Then the actual development is going through what was implemented in this feature, what was added as a test, how it was implemented and why, what cycled, QA testing and how it fleshed out. It does that for each feature. So when I add anything new using this agentic flow, it gives me a lot of context. And this isn't even my technical documentation agent. This is just in the progress of building. So 4-layer parallax depth with a horizontal scroll, micro interactions, including the electric salmon SVG stroke. So that's where we get this fancy interactive stroke that moves with the page. All of it's noted in here. And how does it fall back if for some reason you have your JavaScript disabled or something? What's that look like? What was edited in the scope of this feature? All of those things are added into the documentation. And then a overview, and this is the technical documentation from my final agent, and it builds in what's our general structure, how are we architected, how are we triggering our motion, and what is it about, parallax, depth matrix, what moves in what spot. All of that's set in here, including our tokens, accessibility, the showcase, all of these things. And that is one of the upsides of using the agent. The other one, the agentic dev, did come up with all of this based on just those initial qualifications. Now, caveat, there's a lot of back and forth. So when you're walking through this, not only does it take a lot of processing time and a lot of tokens, I maxed out my tokens several times, it also is regularly asking for your input to make big architecture decisions or to make design decisions. So it's not a push a button and let it run kind of process. I did have to do a couple other lifestyle changes to my agents to make them connect properly. I also would encourage, if you go through a practice like this is just kind of my test state for Agentic. I don't know that I would do it for every project. But if you do work through this process, make sure that you do your initial planning in Opus or even Fable if you're fancy, and then have everything right in Sonnet. My technical doc could have even been done in Haiku. But without that, if you continue even your orchestrator working in Opus, it's going to cost a lot of tokens. Other things to help speed it up. In your Claude, there's settings, your general settings. You can change how it interacts with you in general. Mine is treating me like a peer, and it's architectural, and I don't want it to be long conversational, so we don't let it do that. So other things you can do to try to improve your process, although they can be expensive, is allow Claude to execute multiple things and at once. It can stand up multiple sub-agents doing jobs at the same time. You can enable that. It is expensive. You need to make sure that your lanes are properly enforced. My plugin, which I'm not sharing here, my plugin limits it to 2 executable agent sub-agents in one session at a time. So if the back-end development agent needs sub-agents, it can execute 2. Front-end can execute 2. So altogether, we could have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 agents running at the same time, and that's with my lanes and my secure guardrails. If you don't add that, you could have 50 agents, sub-agents spun out at once and blow out all of your budget. And God forbid that you have open extended API use set, then you're looking at the big money, hundreds, thousands of dollars in process. So keep that in mind. Be safe. Don't do anything stupid. Along with my basic documentation and things, it also sets up tests for me. When I go to execute this in... Oh, this is my JavaScript. That's why I can't redo it. When I go to execute this in the CI pipe, I'm going to have it set these up so that they run in parallel, so that we're not running into a long extended CI pipeline. That's not difficult to do, but the upside here is it's all dropped into JavaScript with express definition and what am I matching and what's the expectation, so that if we're working on a team or if we're really trying to maintain standards like we're doing here, we don't want something to differ. We need to give it this context from the get-go. And then every time we make a change, it's going to go, hey, are these all being accurately represented? It does take more processing to have this kind of QA. So just be aware of that. I build my components, built my hooks for my parallax and my GSAP and my motion tracking and all those things. And then my styles, of course, which is quite extensive. The only things I've left out of this process that I'm probably not going to use the Agentic system to develop are going to be establishing Terraform and how we're going to deploy this thing. CI pipelines, all of that. I've found from testing that it's not a great experience for me to try to build something that I want to guide in a granular level in this Agentic format. I have specifics of what I have in mind, and I have other projects that I've already done this with, and I want to follow a lot of those. So I'm not going to execute any of that. But that being said, there's some pretty cool little bells and whistles in here. By no means am I done. I want to at least add like a about me section. I want to play around with like some of these images potentially. I need to populate my profile. But that being said, I mean, it's pretty solid. Tell me what you think. Let me know if what you would do differently, if you have this kind of agentic development system, how you would leverage it. If you want to access my agentic development system, I'm going to make that available as soon as I'm comfortable taking it out of beta. Right now, it's still a work in progress, so I'm not exposing that yet. When I do, I'll make sure to put an announcement out on YouTube. I'll make sure to drop references in. But for now, that's it for me. My name is Tony. Thank you for being here for this. I hope you enjoyed it, and please feel free to follow me, subscribe if you're interested in more projects like this. Thank you so much. Have a great day.